Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this first event of the third day of the Bray Literary Festival 2022. It's nice to see some people out bright and early on a Saturday morning. This event is called Voices from Afar, and it's being run in association with the Irish Writers' Centre. So Voices from Afar, and we have 3 Voices from Afar, various distances from afar, and what I'm going to do is introduce each of them in turn, and they will read for a while, and then we will, if there's some time at the end, we can have a chat or questions and answers or whatever. So the 3 we have here today are Nithy Kasa, who is an Ireland-based poet of Congolese origin, Democratic Republic of the Congo. Shula Taldi is a writer and translator from Hungary, based now in Northern Ireland. And Jesús, Castro, Yáñez, I'm going to struggle with some of these pronunciations, is an award-winning Galician poet and performer. So the first to read is going to be Nithy, and I will now do a few words about her background and her writing experiences. She, as I said, is from the Congo and based here in Ireland. Her poems have been published in Poetry Ireland Review, Trumpet Magazine, Flair, A New Ulster, Daedalus Press's Writing Home, The New Irish Poets, and the commemorative anthology from the Ireland Chair of Poetry, Hold Open the Door, by UCD Press. She was shortlisted for the Ivan Boland Emerging Poet Award in 2021. Nithy's debut collection of poetry, Palm Wine Tapper and the Boy at Jericho, which is an intriguing title, was published by Dura Press earlier this year. The collection was commissioned by Poetry Ireland and with the support of the Arts Council of Ireland Commission's award. Just some background, Nithy moved to Galway as a teenager, and a poem she submitted to her secondary school magazine caught the attention of her English teacher, whose encouragement led her onto the Poetry Ireland's Poetry Aloud competition, and she reached the final in that on multiple occasions. She moved to Dublin then in 2011 and has remained here since, although I think she continues to balance life between Ireland and the Democratic Republic of the Congo. In 2018, she collaborated with the Irish-born, Irish language poet, in fact, Ciara Ní to open the O'Vale series, Make a Connection, for the European Year of Cultural Heritage. She was a long-time member of the Dublin Writers' Forum and has read for Poetry Ireland, RTE Radio's poetry programme, and very many other events. Interestingly, English is her 4th language, and actually I heard her read a poem, Accents, which talks about that, so I don't know if we'll hear it today. Her themes generally are womanhood, immigration and adventure, and you will find lots more about Nithy if you just Google her, and podcasts and broadcasts and readings and all the rest. So Nithy, we're dying to hear your voice from afar.
Thank you for the introduction, Phil. Yes, so I think it'd be best to start with a poem that Phil has mentioned, Accent. Like, this is the Voices from Afar, and like Phil has introduced, I am from the DR Congo, but I have been living in Ireland for 17 years now. It's a long time. But as you can tell, every time I talk, I do have an accent. And at the start, it wasn't always pretty, because like I said previously in other discussions, being a new generation in Ireland, like when I arrived in Ireland, especially in the countryside, like Galway, you didn't really see many Africans, so we would have been the first one growing up here, because very few of our parents could say that, they grew up in Ireland. I mean, you do have a couple interracial mixed race children from African, heritage. But my generation would have really been the first one growing up here. And there were two types of us. There were those who were born here and those of us who were being brought here. And the one thing that I found that differentiated us was the accent. So as soon as you spoke, people can tell, is it from here, or are you, the question, well, where are you coming from? And the poem just came from my struggle trying to blend in, not trying to have people constantly ask you, where are you from, every time you spoke. And that's where the poem accent came from. Now, can I hear for you? Just have to find the page for it. Thank you. 18. Thanks, Phil. Oh, here it is. Accent. My accent lingered at bay, bleaching its skin, hips tucked into a corset, chewing English. It cleansed its feet with the salty water, then sat on a boulder, talking to itself, instructing the tongue how to pronounce, but it would do otherwise. They will know you got here by boat, not by bicycle. The days spent passing verbs through a needle's herb, knitting phrases. The prinking made you kneel to your toddler self. I came to send this trouble away. English is not mine to keep. The next one I'm going to read is a poem from which the collection takes its title. So the title of the collection is a combination of two poems in the book. So Palm Wine Tapper is one, and The Boy at Jericho is another. And the reason why, it's because the book seemed like it's pretty much sums up the adventures I've had so far from back home in Congo, here in Ireland. But a reason why I didn't pick a poem here in Ireland and I chose one from Jericho was because I was trying to sum up all the adventures. I'm already here. I think we know that. I'm here. I'm coming from Congo, so that's where the Palm Wine Tapper is coming from. I'm here in Ireland, and The Boy at Jericho is the global part of it. So this book is all the adventures. So Palm Wine Tapper, which is just literally a poem describing a profession we have back home. The palm tappers are just literally men that climb trees. So the palm tree in the African tradition, especially the Congolese, is very symbolic. Palm wine, of course, it's a very traditional alcoholic drink, so before the beers and all of that. So the palm wine would have been the main one you had for the festivals, all the parties, funerals. The palm wine was very important, but also the palm leaf is very symbolic as well. People use it for decorations, for parties. Not so much now, but back in the days they do. And particularly the palm leaf being placed in front of a door, a community, at the start of a street, if there is a funeral in the community. So if you're going around Congo and you see a palm leaf just sticking in the middle somewhere, you know, a funeral is happening there. So the community is in mourning. So they are very respected, though it's not practiced anymore. A few in the countries, but in the capitals where I was raised, I think it's nearly gone now. But the palm wine tapper. Palm wine tapper. It is no woman's job, though no one ever said it was. You learn it from your father, one cutter per tree, Interlock yourself with the prey by a rope, a gourd hinged on the hips. Opposing the cast, he swarmed the long-necked beauty right up to its crown, stepping on the scars to pose at the peak where working men could see him cutting the incubus of a tree. He did not fear the ice, nor the void life refused to fill, but leaned against the nothingness, trusting the rope, the ring of union. Mash the bunched fruits for oil, knife the trunk's neck for sap, the palm wine tapped, tangy and breast mill-like. The forest would close. Farmers crossed a neighborhood, hunters in packs, clowning fishermen. The tapper crossed alone, silent. He sees all there is to know up there. A young girl watching, the men of the village. I wanted to marry a palm tapper's son. The next one I'm going to read is called After. So this book is full of memories from the people around me, reasonably so. But I was raised by my grandparents, so the people you see here mostly. I have loads of poems about my grandparents, and this is one of the poems that I've wrote about one of my grandfathers. And he went blind in his old age. And it was just spectacular having to watch the man. He was fascinating. I found both of my grandparents were. So one was a herbalist, and the other one just went blind. So we couldn't really explain what went around. But by the time we met him, he had already gone blind. So we don't remember him having his eyes. So this is the poem I wrote in the memory of him. After. What you would have seen gazing in your eyes ever after were the moons like bulbs dancing. Ashes entombed the browns, the eclipses lasting years. We stared at you at your quiet times, wondering whether you had drifted, or was it another praying hour? Your hair remained the frozen winter grass in summer. The next one I'm going to read is Charcoal Iron, and it's also a memory of my grandparents, my grandmother especially, who lived his life like in the old days. So we were the city-raised children, but our grandparents obviously would have been more country. And it was just interesting to see how they refused to revolve around what was happening, the technology happening around us. They kind of wanted to stick to the old ways, and it was fascinating the way they kind of kept those old equipment. It was just precious, like treasures to them. So this poem just describes this charcoal iron. I was at a reading in, where was it, Balbriggan, and for the very first time I met people in Ireland telling me they knew what a charcoal iron was. Like before, everywhere I went, people were just like, no, we never heard of it. And it was just interesting to know that in Ireland, people know, the box iron that you put coal inside and people used in the old days. So I really, really like that. So charcoal iron. She pressed his shorts to her last days, squinting her eyes, facing the ridges that still stood over the years. Steam iron cannot do. She liked the old ways, the iron of coal. It stayed in a cabinet, a jewel, a recipe for her lover, an alloyed box, a dumbbell's mass shaped like a crocodile's head, its upper lip pierced, a screw-like ring for locking the zigzagged jaw, the handle askew on the alligator. Hot charcoal was placed inside the box for her. Quiet, sitting a short in hand, she waited for the metal to heat, then used the iron, the same as a modern one, feeling each layer, the soft skin of her lover, her back a bow, her trembling hand a master. She pressed his shirts to her last days, squinting her eyes, facing the ridges that still stood over the years. So I'm going to finish off with a poem that I really like. It's one of my favorites in the collection. It's called Monastery. Because the reason why I like it so much is because it's the type of poetry that I like to read and I would love to produce more of in the future. And but I struggle, of course, writing poems like that. So when I had this done, I was very excited that I managed to capture the Irishness in this poem. So monasteries, and it's about an Irish site as well. Monasteries. Bell towers neck long like the obelisks, proof of the country's societies. A priesthood of orisons, of the quill-inked Celts, Celtic crosses, the duties of the celibate travellers was beacon for an island. Peddlers at Clonmacnoise quietened long time ago, but the monks' chants in the Midlands glide. The roofless chambers, the ogham stones with punctuations, lower and near on the raygrass when a Clonmacnoise, for the phantom chants missioned to the halls of the pollened bogs, to the orchards, hallowing. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nithy. That was. It's always intriguing and interesting to hear, to figure out not just the differences between cultures, but the similarities as well. And they're not that far below the surface when you scratch. So our next reader is Shula Taldi, and Csilla is Hungarian by origin, so coming from a different part of the world, from Afar. She is a poet, writer and translator, based currently in Northern Ireland, born in Budapest. Her work has been published in UK and Irish literary magazines and anthologies such as Southward, the Black Mountain Review, The Incubator, Ink, Sweat and Tears, The Stony Thursday Book, The Honest Ultraman, Crannog, and many more. She has published 3 books with Lapwing Publications in Belfast. They're a combination of poetry, memoir and short fiction. And her poetry has been anthologized in a number of publications in Ireland and abroad. She has a story collection, Angel Fur, which was published in 2019, and a new novel, Bed, Table, Door, is forthcoming with Wrecking Ball Press later this year. Film is also a big interest for Csilla, and including the making of film poems, which is a new, interesting development in the whole poetry world. In fact, she has a master's in creative writing for film and TV from Sheffield University, I know. So, her themes include identity, migration, feminism, and human rights. And she has a website, chillataldi.co.uk, where you will find lots more about all her various awards and her writings. Csilla, please.
Thank you so much. So, I wanted to dedicate this reading to Hilary Mantel. because I write historical fiction as well, and because I was listening to her this week, her lectures on the BBC Sound, and she actually gave me so much comfort with preparations for this reading, because she said that we are all part of history, maybe we just don't notice it. And whenever I look at my work, there is so much history in it. And of course, there were events in my life which were very, very important. And as you know now, Russia is very much in the news. So I thought I will read you a story which is relating to Russia. But first of all, let's just tell me a little bit of background to the story. So it originates from my mother, who was a communist. And in my memoir, I wrote about this experience. We traveled to the kindergarten, first on a yellow tram, then on a dark red trolley bus. Every morning and every night, we passed an overhuman sculpture of a bald man with a goat beard, wearing worker clothes, who stood unmoved, lifting his right fist into the sky, looking ahead with stern eyes. Anu, who is that bald man? I would ask my mom, and our conversation became a game. That's Uncle Lenin. What's he doing there? He's greeting communism. And you know what? I saw him with my own eyes in the mausoleum in Moscow. What was he like? Pretty much the same as this statue. She always added the spectacular fact that Uncle Lenin's beard was still growing, many decades after his death. He had special barbers coming to groom him from time to time. So this was the inspiration for the story. Necrophilia. Having spent most of her working life as a professional hairdresser, after her retirement, Tatiana became the personal groomer of a particularly glorious personage. As a perk of her job, she was given a one-room, six-floor flat on the Vladimirskaya, a short walk to the mausoleum, her new place of work. She thought there was no crime in taking the hair home after cutting, including the mustache, the eyebrows, beard, and all the strays she could harvest from the nape and temples. She could not fathom why the hair continued to grow. What force could there be within the embalmed body and the once prolific brain? She put it all into her best crystal vase, which, like most of her possessions, was chipped due to the all too frequent moves in her life. As the great tuft of hair grew, so did Tatiana's fixation with her collection. She kept the vase in a prominent position on the marble top of the Bombay commode near her lace-curtained window. In her free time, she would sit for hours and gaze at the fluffy mop. The crystal facets of the glass broke the image into floating teardrops, flashing dark and light. The crescent moons of fertile aggression, as she called his nail clippings, found a home in a small carved ivory box on the coffee table. It had become her custom to invite Ilyanova to sit with her by the samovar on Sunday afternoons. Her neighbor's large presence calmed Tatiana, who often pictured herself as a boy bobbing up and down on the Volga in danger of drifting away. Ilyanova did her great service by anchoring her like a heavy concrete block, although, if she was really honest, she just wanted an excuse to light the silver samovar, a family relic left by her father. Every time she did so, she could hear his voice saying, "It's a sin not to share the pleasure." Ilyanova perhaps mistook the box on the coffee table for the sugar bowl, or perhaps she was just curious. She peeped inside, wrinkled her nose, and snapped it closed. The next day, Tatiana was picked up from work and taken away in an enormous black chaika. The car floated like a coffin through the streets of Moscow, giving Tatiana time to say goodbye. The commissar charged her with necrophilia. She had to roll the word around in her head a few times, dissecting it down into its components until she understood what it meant. She groped for words to defend herself, but she was lost. Eventually, she managed to utter a short, defiant laugh. When they found out that her father had perished in the Gulag, they became rude. "Why did you steal the property of the people?" the commissar shouted. Although almost with her last breath, she answered, "I wanted to teach him." Now it was their turn to laugh. "What could you teach our teacher?" Tatiana bowed her head and looked inward. "Some respect," she sighed. I'm sure that some children in Russia call Uncle Putin, Uncle Putin. And so as it was mentioned, I make video poems. And I actually published this pamphlet, which is called Vertical Montage, and it's dedicated to Eisenstein, the father of montage theory. And I grew up with actually Ivan the Terrible on the television in the winter time, in the winter holidays. So which watched the film every year as a child, and that is somehow engraved in my memory. So I will actually refer to that in a poem here, which is, I'm afraid, called Horror. I keep going back to the Luna Park in Budapest, in swirling teacups pushed and squeezed together by gravity. Joyful screams echo, interlaced with the news about Garda, searching between the rails on the Enterprise line from Belfast to Dublin. Think of all the people squashed in a derailing train, and the unspeakable last question, who put the bomb down? The silent community support raises the salient dilemma of collective suicide, the teenage terror of self-harming, to make a point and to be noticed. Abuse tit for tats en masse, the rage against neglect. But the worst part of the lingering childhood memory is the thick grease covering the ground when your feet are trying to get a grip after the teacup had come to a halt. Gray-green mass of slime on the dilapidated line of floor. In the back of the mind, Ivan the Terrible's muted anguish, the cruelty of revolution, abandoned pram running down the Odessa steps. Metallic smell, unspeakable horror, like the clean rifle under your nose when lying on the frost-hard grass in early autumn on a Cold War defense day, hugging the cold metal under the chin. Screaming encouraged, learning to shoot compulsory, but why the need to be shaken? Yes, so this is day for night. This is another technique in filmmaking, which was introduced by Francois Truffaut, and he introduced that you shoot during light time, but then use filters to make it look like night. Day for night. Looking back on my day, its teaching had been, I reckoned, our powerfully exposed, tender perfection. On the train, 3 men were talking to each other, swaddling me, the eavesdropper, with the melody of their Arabic. I understood the dirt under their nails, their bloodshot glimpses, the tired smiles. I stepped over to fanciful Arabia for a moment, my toes sensing the rough sand, my hair ironed by the wind, feelings of sinking, slowly opening lips behind rusty eyelids, men talking outside, women inside, gently loving each other in innocence. The train stopped at my destination. I left the men behind, luckily, for my staring threatened to become annoying, and for the well-known cultural phobia of being a woman, I did not want to be sucked into their world. Knowing that that world, like desert dreams now, only exists between the waving pages of our cellular memory and the hand-painted sheets of escapism. An image, a flash, made me speed up my steps, and I escaped from the tube. Rolling in the crowd, looking back, I reckoned, all that remains is our belief in the tenderness deep in our being. So a little bit lighter. So my favorite city is Paris. And when I defected in 1981, shortly after my birthday, 18th birthday, from Hungary, I went to Paris. But later on, many years later, I went back. And this is the impression of the later Paris that I experienced. Flame of liberty. To America, Paris is freedom still. You can buy a house, a studio, or a flat, near Disneyland. You can live a la bohemian on champagne and oysters. On the cobbled streets of Montmartre, Sacré-Cœur is a steep hike, a crazy Arabian palace for dear Christ. Sing to God in choirs, enjoy communal breathing, drink the absinthe of civilized trance, and watch ghostly flickering pompadours on their way to balls, as if it was still their business to entertain society, providing food for gossip. In the ambience of art and artists, Berlioz, Paganini, Hahnemann, Stravinsky, Hemingway, Elvis, Popeye. And I will finish with a poem which is fairly new, and again, it's my mother, features in it. I wrote it in May. I was visiting Hungary, and just at that time, Mr. Orbán made this statement. Following the EU's oil sanctions would mean that the EU dropped an atomic bomb on Hungary's economy. So this is the emotive language that he's using to influence his people. And now we are hearing the threat of nuclear bombs, so it's very scary altogether. So this is called Budapest Diary, May 2022. I'm sitting safe in this beautiful nest, Budapest, thinking about obscure origins. The word pest must come from pests, while Buddha is a calm Buddha sitting high in the hills. Who knows? The two parts of the city alongside the river, once worlds apart, now closer than ever, safe from war, we are told. We have peace. The ghosts of the past, the homeless or drunkards stumbling along the road, that woman's just stopped the traffic's current together with her breath. She's drowning in her own sea of hopelessness, but manages to swim to the other side. On the TV screen, massage data, opinion-forming emotional currents with undertones, lies. We think only inflation is a fact, but still, who cares? We are safe. Talking of ghosts, walking along the well-lit promenade in the balmy night, I saw a pair of cranes and thought of whom. Where once bodies floated on the back of this river, there is now a sanctuary for birds, and this gave me hope. In the softness of LED light, resting my eyes on the ornate beauty of the Parliament building, I heard Ukrainian tongues twirl in laughter. Pleased with their temporary home, I know, we cannot hear the thunder of artilleries, but 1,000 miles up northeast, men die and civilians are taken to hostage. I went to the Actors Museum today with my 90-year-old mother, Agnes, who is still my dear, dear sanctuary, and we laughed with shaking bellies at old jokes.
Thank you, Csilla, for those insights and scary times indeed, no matter where you live or come from these days. On Cilla's website as well, you'll see lots of examples of her film poems, well worth checking out. So our final reader has come from afar with his voice for today, well, not quite for today, via the Jerome Guthrie Centre. Jesús, Castro, Yáñez. Close enough. Born in Galicia, lives in Galicia. Where he is a poet and a dentist, which is an interesting combination. He started his literary career very young. At age 17, he won the Minerva Prize for Poetry, and 3 years later won the Yáñez Poetry Prize. In 2015, he received 2 major awards, the Nelly de Pignon, I'm pronouncing all these wrong, I'm sure, Short Story Award, with a story called The Old Man and the Minotaur, and the Pérez Parele National Poetry Prize for his book The Names and the Hymns, and interestingly turned that into a transmedia project on Instagram, which is designed to be experienced on the smartphone, and it accompanies with a performance. No One Wanted to Be a Cloud, I think that is the title of the performance piece, in which he uses a video projection and body expression to deal with subjects such as internalized homophobia and hate crimes against the queer community. He has had poems published in several magazines, including Dorma and Obituario magazine. He is the author of free bilingual plaquettes, Spike and Wave, and in 2017 he published in English as part of the Poetry Will Be Made by All.com project. In 2021 he curated and translated Campo de Plumas, a collection of poems by LGBT plus writers across history. His writing, photographic works and videos have appeared in a range of publications, including an anthology of new Galician poetry in 2019. And he too has a website, jesúscastroyañez.tumblr.com. Jesús, please, you read for us now. Thank you.
Good morning. Thank you everybody for coming, and thank you, Phil, for the exhaustive introduction. I don't remember doing all of that, but that's good that I did it. And second of all, I'd like to say sorry because my English can get messy sometimes. You'll feel the mechanism of my brain trying to move faster. It can't go faster. I'm so tired of speaking English all month long. My brain is not working anymore, so sorry for that. But it's because English is not my first language. It's not even my second language. It's kind of my third language, because I come from afar. I'm a voice from afar indeed. And I come from this place in northwest Spain. It's called Galicia. So it's a small country. We have our own culture, our own language. And we're Spanish. We belong to the Spanish state, but we're really a whole different thing somehow. So today I'd like to read some poems in Galician first, and then the translations to English that Keith Payne did. Keith Payne's a poet and translator from Ireland, and he lives in Galicia part of the year, and he did the translations to English. So I'd like to thank him for the work he did, and he's responsible for me being here, and I spent a whole month in the Tyrone Guthrie Center writing and having lots of time and space just for poetry, so it's something that I'm very grateful. And so I'd like to thank him, and also Yolanda Castaño, that's the poet from Galicia, who's also responsible for me being here. So first of all, I'd like to read some versions in Galician language, and the translation first, and maybe the last ones, I'll just read it in English, because you'll be tired of not understanding anything. But I think it's important also that I get to do it, and you get to hear it, because even if I'm from Afar, I get a lot of parallels between Galicia and Ireland, and I want you to feel that in the language without understanding the words, maybe in the rhythm, maybe in the sounds, maybe in the color of the language. Because I feel there's many parallels going on between Galicia and Ireland. It may be the Celtic background, I don't know. It may be some historical events that happened at the same time. But I went to the Patrick Kavanagh Center. Some resident in the Tyrone Guthrie Center took me to the Patrick Kavanagh Center. The people at the office had translated this poem from ancient Irish to contemporary English for me to read it, because it speaks about the relation between Galicia and Ireland. So it's just not me that I'm kind of being delusional about it. It's something that exists. So I'm hopeful that you can get some of that in the Galician language and the themes I'm writing about. I hope it resonates with you. This first one is called River. Mollo as mans e fágome caixa de resonancia do río. Creba no murmurio contra as pedras a croia da auga. Todo canto escoitamos, nada máis ca a codia do que nalgure estreme. Teño man do río para que non o leve a corrente. Fágome moiño que moe a flor da auga. Dousing my hands, I make of myself and river a sounding board. Slathering, smothering around the stones a wet pith. All we hear, clearly the skin over what is somewhere trembling. I have a hand in the river, so the current won't take it. I make of myself a quernstone to press the river's bloom. Un anxo acendeu a nosa fronte cunha marca de 7 espellos. Un anxo con xenitais na voz e ningún idioma para vergoña, e con fariña nas palabras e verbos só de fogais felices como estrelas, e unha vez que estopen volveremos aos segredos e mensaxe da nada. Un anxo nunca repetiu ningún son por medo a facelo sólido, e calou así só para que non lle pesasen as palabras, e ser honesto, e facer do silencio unha arqueoloxía íntima onde recordar e coidar. Nos escoitamos a nosa voz como un trono, o dicir está tronando, nos manchamos de branco a camisa branca, e sabemos que así foi amar. Unha luz todas as luces, aínda que unha luz cega para si mesma. An angel lit her brow with the mark of 7 mirrors. An angel with genitals in his voice and no word for shame, with flower on his tongue and verbs only of bright vowels like stars that when they explode will return us with no news of anything. An angel has never once repeated a sound for fear of making it solid, hushed so the words one way on him, honest and shaping from the silence an intimate archaeology where memory is safekeeping. We hear our voices thunder, a storm is blowing. We stain white our white shirts, knowing this is love. One light, all of the lights, although a light is blind to itself. And this one is about names and the power we have when we name things. And we don't have that much power when we name things, actually. And words choose what they want to do sometimes, and they have their own will, and we have to go along with it. But sometimes we say something, and it really affects the world. Not many times. So it's called semantics. And names are a curious thing because this month I kept hearing my name all the time. Jesus, Jesus, but Jesus. And I was like, at first my ears went like this sort of invisible antenna all the time. And then I just went along with it. And now I find myself saying Jesus all the time. So names have power, yeah. This is called semantics. Seguirán sin querer las palabras casi todo que lles pertence, inda que outra vez repitamos por si alguna cenosa puidese chegar a convencelas de sí mesmas. Dicimos lume e ningunha calor cumpre, a música vocexa sen aire baixo o único ritmo das letras. Chega a noite sen obsidiana nos ollos, cando sós nosas voces a reclaman. Sucede, porén, o seguinte: o chamare o teu nome e ti o meu, entregámolo a outro un himno, pousámonos como un carbón aceso na boca do mundo. So, semantics. They will follow indifferently words, most everything that belongs to them, even were we to repeat them over and again, as if some faith of ours could convince them of themselves. We say fire and no heat rises. The music stifles a yawn to the singular rhythm of the letters. Night falls with no obsidian eyes when it's only our voices that call. And yet, the following occurs. When I call your name and you mine, we give to the other a hymn. We place ourselves like a burning coal into the mouth of the world. So I'm going to read the last two, I think, just in the English version. I think you got a sense of what Galician's like and the sounds of it and the rhythm. So I will read the last two. And before I read the last one, I will explain something more about Galicia so you can get a grip. This is called Ultramarine. It's complicated, this need to be a simple song and not to make of silence an enemy to learn to admire, and not of our voices a quiet charm to hang on the threshold of a room where persists the familiar smell of total strangers. It makes no sense to speak of our voice in the singular, because there's no center to this room. We spend a lot of time pressed to the windows, because it's important to see that glass splits the evening in two like a peach, and better if it's broken, so it knows how to be more open. It's important to see that a window can believe its own lie, and then sing a simple song in which the landscape admits it's worthless, in the end being free because of that. Inside the room, the chairs, the shelves, the lamp, their concrete shadows stretching out. The night, like any map, speaks of what's missing, and when we each turn in our beds, the light switch off, everything will become real. That is, everything will seem necessary for a moment. And the last one is called Baltar, 1 a.m. August. Baltar is the name of the place I live in. It's a little village, maybe 100 people, and like 3,000 cows. So the cows are taking over. Galicia in general, we have our own cultural language. From centuries ago, from the medieval times, it was the language of kings. It was a very important language with a strong literary tradition. But with the passing of centuries, Spanish kind of absorbed it. And now children from the younger generations are not able to speak it properly, and it's getting lost. And many speakers are changing their language to Spanish when they move to the cities. So there's this double abandonment of the language and the rural places, because everyone keeps going to the coast and the city. So this poem is about this double disappearance going on, the people and the language, because people and language are inevitably tied to each other. So I want you to imagine that you're in the middle of nowhere in Galicia, and it's 1 a.m. in August, and you can't hear anything, and then you can hear everything. There aren't many of us left here. They told us to pass the time, making as little noise as possible, and so we all get along. After going to bed, if we pay attention, we can hear the night scratching its body in the woods. and all of us, each one in their own room, thinks of the words that remain with us. We can hear the screens of mist creaking against the rooftops. We can hear an abundance of ivy ciphering the surface of a farewell. We can hear, too, the pears ripening on the tree behind the house, and they are like utterances the enthusiastic summer is beginning to learn, or songs that have just taken root. Behind all that, there is an echo that never ends, and we never get to find out what it says, and it says without end, us, we are not so many, and we're searching for a word that won't leave. We listen very closely, and we're silent, like someone sleepwalking into the disappearance of a place. The pine needles in their continuous dance ask something as they make their way onto the brink of the past, flourishing to abandon. The night brings black words, like happy swallows in a cave, like those powerful tractor tires. We listen to the night's black tongue. It must have been eating blackberries then. And this was the last poem, so thank you very much.
Thank you. I can't resist saying, Jesus, that was a great reading. But thank you very much. And it was lovely to hear the Galician language, which certainly brought out the musicality of the pieces and the rhythm and so on as well. We have a few minutes, so I don't know if anybody wants to add to things that they've said already. I know you've all mentioned cultural issues and different issues about living in one place or another, and I'm curious, I suppose, to know to what extent that influences, especially your writing. Do you think it has changed, well, particularly for Nithy and Csilla, how you write or what you write about, even if by being here as opposed to being back in your own country where you came from? I know, having lived abroad myself, but pre-internet days and pre-cheap travel, you know, the one thing, it's a double-edged coin, I suppose, or a two-sided coin, that the first thing was that you begin to miss things that you didn't think you even cared about when you were away, you know, celebrating national feast days and things like that with great vigour, which you would usually avoid oftentimes when you're at home. And of course, the second thing is then that you see and get a more complete sense of your home place by looking back from afar in that sense. And indeed, you hear, even overhear conversations and comments that make you realise that we're not the greatest race ever put on the earth that we thought we might have been. So it's, you know, it works both ways, I think. So I don't know if you want to take up that, anybody, and comment from your perspectives or not.
Yes, I would agree with everything that you said, and it definitely does change your ways of writing. In one way, I would say you now have a new home, so you have more to write about. There is this new world that you are open to tell. But also back home, like you explained, sometimes you write about home as your home, but sometimes you're looking at it as an outsider. And sometimes it's about memories, but sometimes you're just analyzing, observing, not only where you're coming from, but Ireland as well, because it's your home now, but at the same time, you're a comer. So you're looking at it both ways. And I would say the writing is also the themes being explored is one thing, but literature as well. It's not the same where you're coming from and here. And having studied the Yeats and the Heaney's, all of that, at some extent, it will have an influence on the writing style, like Monasteries, like you would have said. It's just a completely different rhythm than the Congolese of the storytelling, like the palm wine tappers. So you have, I think it's an advantage you have, because you can kind of tap into all of it. So yeah, in that way, yeah.
Well, I don't have that experience. I don't live abroad. I live in Galicia. But I'm thinking about migration that happens with translation also, because if poetry is what happens, what the mind moves, translation is what happens, what the poetry moves. So it's a kind of migration of language also. And I don't know how it affects my language, the fact that I was here for a month, speaking and thinking and making relationships in English, but I think it will. And it's funny when I read my poems because I lose control of them. They are not mine when they are translated. And somehow I find things that I didn't know they were in the poems. So I think when people move from their country to other place in the world, they also find themselves in another light, under another light. So you can reconstitute yourself in this other sense that you weren't aware of.
I don't hit you with this unexpectedly, but I picked up a line from your website or someplace anyway where I was looking in, and you had maybe taken it out of context, but it says that no other time will we exist as much as when we are away. I was just wondering what was behind that, because I know, for example, again, going back to my own experience, I never felt such freedom as when I was away from Ireland. So I don't know if that was it.
So for me, I think when I left Hungary, I had a sense of loss for a long time. I felt as if I lost my language, and then I had to learn other languages, of course. But after a while, I used to translate my work from Hungarian into English, and after a while, I just realized that I am rewriting it when I'm translating, and that it doesn't make much sense to do it, so why don't I just write it in English straight away? And actually what I feel is that I found a home in the English language, but I'm sure that I bring the taste of the Hungarian just as much as I bring the taste of, on my tongue, there is the accent. So that I think that origin and the literature that I grew up with seeps into my writing in some ways. So maybe, I don't know whether this answered the question, but maybe it just adds a little bit to it. But now, since for the past couple of years, I started to translate from Hungarian into English, and that actually is so much fun, and so it's a different way of looking at the language. So I find that enriches my work.
Yeah, it's one thing that never ceases to amaze and impress me, how people who move here become so proficient with the language so quickly. It's something we just can't replicate when we go abroad from Ireland. But maybe that's the problem of the English language being too universal. But so I don't know, we're tight on time now at this stage, so does anybody from the audience wish to put a question to any or all of our guests? Anybody? Any takers? No, too early in the day, maybe. The brains haven't woken up yet. So, well, then, if anybody, do you want to add anything? Anybody like to make any final comment? No? Okay. Look, it's been great. It's been lovely listening to you all and getting a little glimpse or an insight into your experiences, both here and there. And all I can say is that here we are all the much richer for people who come here to share their cultures with us and to make us realise that there are more people in the world than the Irish. And so on that note, I think we'll call it to a close. Thank you very much.